Like Dell's World number 380 for the 16th of November 2021. And it's Napod Pomo 21.
I think it's time for Mike Dell's World.
There it is. And there it is. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Whatever the case may be for you, wherever you're listening. I'm Mike, and this is Mike Dell's World. Today is Tuesday, which on my schedule for National Podcast Posting Month means it's a Traverse City episode. And I guess I'm going to answer the question I get asked, especially this time of year. I get asked this question a lot. Why do you live in Traverse City? And I could suppose I could give the easy answer. I grew up here. A lot of my family is here. That kind of stuff. And that's true. Definitely. It's cool that my folks are still here. I got a 94-year-old grandmother that lives about a mile from me. And she's still kicking and living on her own and all that good stuff. And we get together somewhat frequently, although it's kind of strange. I don't see my parents as, I see them at least once a week, but, not a whole lot more than that. They're about 10 miles away, but that's not a big deal. It's just the fact that, I grew up here, but that's not even it. The job isn't keeping me here anymore. I could pretty much live anywhere I have an internet connection and a phone line. Or not even a phone line, just an internet connection and a cell phone. Or maybe just an internet connection, but, I could live pretty much wherever I want. My wife is retired, so, that's a thing. So she doesn't work outside the home. She does some small things here and there, but she could do that anywhere. And, so we're not bound here by that. There's certainly better weather spots, although there's nothing nicer than a summer day in Michigan or even a fall day in northern Michigan. But the winters can be a little rough. And I think that's some of the charm that being that I grew up here, I'm kind of used to that. Although, I've lived other places. I've lived in Florida, I've lived in Idaho, I've lived in Iceland. Spent a lot of time in a lot of other places. The weather's not really a big motivator for me, although, I do sort of dread the long winters, although I look forward to it this time of year because everything seems to slow down right after the holidays. And this, I'm sure, happens everywhere, but more so up here. After the holidays, things just sort of mellow. We're just waiting for the blizzard and removing snow and, just staying warm and staying happy. And there's something to be said for, that natural slowdown that we get every year, the cavemen and the humans before civilization really took hold. They had that thing, they'd spend all summer, spring, summer, and part of the fall, getting ready for the long winter. And, there's something to be said for that, a chance to sort of wind down. Now, the way things work nowadays, we got artificial lights and heat and, electricity and worldwide communications. I mean, who knows? You could be sitting in Antarctica listening to me or in Iceland or somewhere in Africa or somewhere in Europe or somewhere in Canada and, hello to the Canadians over the border. But, it doesn't have, you don't have to be right here for me to be able to communicate with you, either one way like this in a podcast or two-way, via Zoom or, Facebook chat, whatever. I mean, there's 100 ways we can stay in communications now. As in Iceland, I felt pretty isolated because, phone call was $1.25 a minute, and the time difference and all that. So we didn't do a lot of that. I did have television stations, some from Europe and some they piped in like the morning shows, the Today Show. I remember we used to get that about noon. The Tonight Show would come on at about 7 in the morning. And a few other, national shows like that. And of course, when big football games were happening, that they show that on Armed Forces television. And, so it was, you weren't completely left out in the cold that way, no pun intended. But, we used to get, we had an airplane that would come in on Wednesdays. And it was a DC-8 Combi, those of you that are into airplanes, as I am, but it was a DC-8 Combi, which meant that the front half of the passenger cabin was cargo and the back half was people. And it was we called it the tater or the rotator. And basically when you got stationed up there, you would come in on a Wednesday, and then those that were leaving would leave, later that day on Wednesday. It would land about 7 in the morning and take off about 10 at night or something like that because the time difference, whatever. But and by the way, it was Hawaiian Airlines, which was kind of ironic going to Iceland, but they had the contract at the time. But the front half of the airplane was all the mail and other supplies that didn't come in, normal, military supplies and what they didn't buy local. But, we would get the mail would come in on Wednesday. So Wednesday, everybody would be, crowding the post office and as they were sorting the mail. I used to volunteer to sort mail, and it was great. And we got new magazines, and magazines were like a lifeline up there. It was amazing. A magazine was like gold. You get done reading a magazine, you put it out in the day room, and it was gone. And there was a big box in the post office too, where all the magazines that, say somebody had a subscription to a magazine and, they didn't forward those to APO boxes. What does APO stand for? I don't remember. But anyway, the military post office wouldn't forward magazine subscriptions, so they would just throw all the magazines in a box and, first come, first serve. And, we used to tear that up. And, of course, we had a pretty good library, and we'd spend a lot of time reading. And, that was what you had to do up there. There was no internet at the time, or at least no internet that we had anything to do with. And, like I said, couldn't really afford to do a lot of phone calling and that. But anyway, this is more about Traverse City. But, in Traverse City, we're kind of, we're not isolated by any stretch, but it is one of the few places on the planet that's a good 35, 40 miles away from a freeway. We don't have interstate. The nearest interstate's 50 or 60 miles away. And, I always tell people when they are in Traverse City, if you find yourself in Traverse City, you either meant to come here or you're lost because it's not on the way to anything, really. Leelanau County, I guess, but... And that's, I consider that the same area because it's on the Grand Traverse Bay. But, we're kind of the end of the road, at least in lower Michigan. And so, it's not like a big transitory area where, a lot of people are passing through like other places I've lived. When I lived in Idaho, we had Interstate 84. It was the main highway between Salt Lake City and Seattle. Or Portland, or somewhere up there in the Northwest. And, there was always people passing through, and it was a whole different vibe. Same thing when I lived in Florida. I was 10 miles off of I-10, and, it's the main drag across the southern United States. And plus I was near Highway 98, which was, the main highway along the Gulf Coast. And there's just a lot of people passing through, and you just don't get that in Traverse City very often. It's not a normal route that anyone would take to get elsewhere. It's just, they tend to come here. And I kind of like that about this place. We get a lot of tourists, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of visitors, a lot of snowbirds. Snowbirds are an interesting bunch. They live here when the weather's good and then take off when it's cold. And I can certainly see the wisdom in that. And it may be something I do in the future. I don't know. Although I don't know where I'd want to go. Not a huge fan of Florida weather-wise, although it's growing on me a little bit. When I lived there, it was okay, and I've got family in South Florida, and it's always good to go down and visit. But some of the touristy areas in Florida are just unreal. They're worse than up here in the summer. Orlando, geez, I don't dislike Orlando, but I certainly wouldn't want to live there year round or anything, or even part of the year. I'd pick someplace out in the boonies. Maybe in Texas, same thing. I'm not a huge fan of Texas in general, but there's some nice spots and all that. But it's just too doggone hot down there a lot of the year. And same with Florida, but we get just as warm as Florida in the summer up here. So it's not really. Like I said, I'm not really weather motivated like some of the snowbirds. Like I said, the tourists we get up here in general are nice enough people. I haven't really met too many rude people. That's another thing about this area, northern Michigan in general. Traverse City, is a little bit more metropolitan compared to, say, Gaylord and Gaylord has a lot of pass through because they're on I-75. But the whole northern part of lower Michigan and pretty much the entire UP of Michigan. They're, some pretty hardy people, and they're all pretty friendly for the most part. There's grumpy grouches everywhere, and the crime rate here in Traverse City is probably a little bit less than the crime rate, of a comparable size city closer to an interstate. We've got our problems up here. We don't get nearly as many homeless up here because it's too darn cold. I mean, there is some homeless, and there's some good organizations around here that are trying to take care of them. We do have one area that I know of that is kind of a tent city, and I feel bad for the folks over there. But what do? They don't want help. They whatever. But so I mean, there are some quote unquote bad sections of Traverse City, but I don't feel unsafe anywhere in the city or around the area really. Like I said, the crime rate's probably a tad lower than average for the amount of people in the area. I think we're around 100,000, 150,000 in the metro area. 5 counties surrounding Traverse City, but Traverse City itself, I think, is still around 20,000 in the actual city. I'm not in the actual city here. I'm 100 yards from the city limit, something like that. But I'm officially in East Bay Township, which, like I said, not really a big distinction. But, I do feel like I'm kind of out in the boonies a little bit. If you go look at the picture I picked, the airplane that took that picture or drone or whatever was pretty darn close to my house looking west. So I'd have been right below where that picture was taken. At the base of East Bay, and this picture is the city looking over West Bay. East Bay is more rural, but not really. But yeah, that's one of the other reasons. Like I said, you don't find too many unfriendly people here. The business owners and businesses they're just friendly people, and and then of course we've got some of the big box stores, not all of them, but we've got Target and Wally World and Home Depot and Lowe's and Menards and those kind of places. But we don't have some of the more we don't have like a what was that one Trader Joe's. We don't have what's the one that Amazon owns, a grocery store. But we don't have one of those. We have a local outfit that's like that. And they have 2 stores, and we don't have big chain grocery stores. Now, like I said, we do have Walmart, Target, and Meijer are the 3 big ones, but we have some local ones. We got a little place, Tom's grocery stores or Tom's food markets, and there's, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 of them. We got Olson's, they've got 2 or 3 of them, and we've got a lot of local stuff. Same thing with the radio market here. We don't have big market radio up here. We don't have Citadel. We don't have Clear Channel. We don't have any of these big radio groups. Clear Channel, I guess, would be called iHeart Radio now, but we don't have any stations owned by them or run by them. And we have local owners. We got Midwest Broadcasting covers every genre of station. They got 8 or 9 stations total, something like that, maybe more, but 8 or 9, I think. McDonald Graber's got 4, 5, 6. There's a couple other big owners that own 10, 12 stations. That's it, and there's they're local stations. We've got our AM talker in the morning is all local programming up until noon. And they have local news breaks even after that during the day. What radio station in a big market are you going to get a lot of local? You just don't. And there's several stations like that here. One of the other big things about it is there's trees. I lived in Idaho, and there was some trees, in the towns and on the base that I was stationed at and all that. I had a tree in my yard. In fact, I was on Google Earth the other day just fiddling around, seeing what everything looked like. I went to my old house in Mountain Home, Idaho, and there was a tree in the yard when I was living there that was probably 3 inches around, and now 30-something years later, it's quite a bit bigger and quite a bit taller, but it's desert. Iceland, the tallest tree I saw in Iceland, maybe 20 feet. The big joke up there was, how do you find your way out of the Icelandic National Forest if you get lost? And the answer was stand up, because being that close to the Arctic Circle and even over the Arctic Circle, a lot of trees that grow very high. So it makes me appreciate all the more, what we have here. And, a lot of people ask me about the snow. Yeah, it's really not as bad as it sounds. Even on a bad year, it's just snow. And, yeah, it might slow you down. You might have to make arrangements to get your driveway and sidewalks cleared off if you're not able to do it yourself. But it's also a good way to get exercise. I have a tractor with a plow and a snowblower, and I got a walk-behind snowblower, and of course I got shovels, and the walk-behind snowblower and all of it's work. Especially if it's 5 degrees outside, you bundle up like the Michelin Man, and it still gets pretty cold, and just staying warm takes some energy. But that walk-behind snowblower, it takes a lot of energy. For an hour walking around outside when it's cold. Even if you are bundled up. I always tell people, I'd rather be in the cold than the hot. You can always put more clothes on, but there's generally a limit to how much you can take off. And even if you take it all off, it might still not help. So, it's, I love it up here. I just do. It can be a pain, for like traveling. And I'm lucky that our airport here has 4 airlines, and it's more or less within walking distance of my house, so it's not like it's too hard to get to the airport if I need to go somewhere that way. Driving, yeah, you got to drive 35, 40 miles or 50 miles to get to a freeway, if depending on which way you're going. But it's a nice ride. It's nice 2-lane highways, 65 speed limits. Generally, you got to watch out for deer and other idiots on the road. That's one thing up here. We have our share of idiots on the road, but it doesn't everywhere. But that's generally why I like it up here. It's just we don't have hurricanes, we don't have earthquakes, we generally don't have forest fires and wildfires. And I've been places that's had all of that stuff, and It's really something. In Florida there, Hurricane Andrew came across South Florida and looked like it was headed towards us. We evacuated all our airplanes out to Texas, and then Andrew ended up hitting Texas instead, or New Orleans or whatever, that whole area west of us. So our airplanes were actually closer to the action than they were if we would have left them where they were at Eglin. But been in places that had earthquakes, not big earthquakes. I mean, Idaho would rumble a little bit, and Las Vegas, I remember feeling one there one time, and and wildfires out west in Idaho, we used to get wildfires. Now, luckily they stayed in the desert for the most part, or up in the mountains. Where I was at in the little town, it was pretty safe. We weren't that close to the edge of the desert, and I'm sure as it's built up more, the towns are probably even a little more safe. But I do remember, driving across the desert on the freeway, and on the horizon, for as long as you could see on the horizon, it was just an orange glow from the big wildfires out there, and this, the sagebrush burning, smoke and all that. It's something we don't deal with here that often. We get forest fires now and again, usually up further north. They've had forest fires, but it's pretty rare around here. We get enough rainfall and all that, but every once in a while nature throws a thing at it. But no, and very few tornadoes. I mean, every once in a while we get a tornado or a severe thunderstorm, whatever. But that's not an every year thing. Maybe every 10 years one hits. Somewhere around here, populated. Yeah, we get blizzards, but again, what's a blizzard hurt? Really? I mean, snow falling. Yeah, I mean, if it gets too ridiculous, it definitely impedes travel, which, people that need to get to the hospital or whatever may have more of a problem because of snow and blizzards and bad driving conditions and whatnot. But for the most part, if you're not urgently needing to go anywhere, just sit it out, take a break. It's pretty relaxing, actually. So anyway, that's my little spiel about why I live in Traverse City. I guess I'll add to this that if there's a couple other places that I would probably consider moving to if I couldn't live here. I wouldn't mind being in, like out in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky or Tennessee. Maybe, in a smaller town, maybe not a tiny town, but a smaller town in one of those places might be cool. Tennessee still gets a little hotter in the summer than I would prefer, but then again, the winters are milder for sure. I wouldn't mind Idaho, to be honest with you. I would probably live somewhere on the outskirts of Boise, one of the lesser towns. Like maybe Meridian or Napa or Caldwell or some town that's not too far out, but far enough out. That would be okay, probably. And I'm sure there's other places around the country that I haven't been to that I'd probably like. Northern Nevada would be kind of cool. A little town of Ely. I always found that one to be kind of neat. We used to go there to go to the casino. It's not too far from Mountain Home. Well, I take that back. It was probably 3 or 4 hour drive, but out west, that's not so bad. Where I lived in Idaho at the time was a 55-mile drive to McDonald's, to the nearest McDonald's, which I guess is no big loss, but, nowadays there's a McDonald's on every corner, just like a Starbucks. But, yeah, those would probably be a couple of the places I might consider living. Texas, like I said, I don't have any big hatred for Texas, but a lot of Texas I wasn't a fan of. I lived in San Antonio for a while, and that's just altogether too hot most of the year. But I could probably see living somewhere in North Texas, north of Dallas or something like that. Might not be too bad. Like I said, there's other places, but my main thing is I really like the slower pace for the most part that we have up here. And especially in the winter, we get at least 2 good months, sometimes 3 good months of things not moving quite as fast. Not as many events going on and not as much, outdoor chores other than, keeping the driveway and walkways clear and digging out the mailbox once in a while. It's pretty mellow, pretty laid back. And I like that. So anyway, and for those of you thinking about moving to Traverse City, don't. Everything I said was a lie, and stay away. Catch me later.